Hey everybody, it's the Doom Dog, and it's about time that I got back to Halo. Last year I finished my Fallout 3 video over a month early, and I let you guys vote on what game I would review in the meantime. The first Halo, or the first Medal of Honor? You chose the first Halo, and I did a review of it a little over a year ago. I promised I would get back to it after I finished the Untold Legends trilogy. I have done so it's time to review Halo 2. It's been a long time, so let me remind you of the ground rules for my Halo reviews. First off, this examines the single-player portion of the games only. That is where my primary interest in the series lies, so that is what my reviews focus on. When I am critiquing the stories, there might be questions about the single-player campaigns that get answered in one of the books. If this is the case, the answer should have been provided in the game. I am still going to point it out because that's a problem with the game's writing. With that in mind, let's begin. The first Halo was a big hit for Microsoft. The story was well praised, as was the level design. People would bring their Xboxes over with additional TVs to set up LAN parties for long nights of Halo multiplayer. It didn't even have online. People loved it that much. It was a big smash hit for the Xbox, and it was a big system seller. Given its massive success, a sequel was guaranteed. It had a much larger budget, and the team had more than a year to build it as an FPS this time. It should have been smooth sailing, right? Well, things do not always go according to plan. Do you remember the E3 demo for this game?
This is a real-time feed. No smoke and mirrors pre-recorded bullshit.
Yeah, that one. That was a lie. It was smoke and mirrors. Bungie basically pulled a Killzone 2 before Guerrilla Games pulled a Killzone 2. Or did Killzone 2 pull a Halo 2? Whatever. Both games turned out well for both companies. I doubt either of them is regretting it too much because both were widely praised by the media and fans alike. Anyway, they were working on building the game for 8 months. From what I gather, they just couldn't get it working on the Xbox hardware and had to scrap the entire thing and start brand new. That had to be hard to do, and it seriously set them back. They wound up in serious crunch, and it's well known at this point that entire levels had to be ripped out of the game. Things like that can mess with the storytelling and the natural progression in the game. How then did Halo 2 turn out? Let's take a closer look. Halo 2 takes place shortly after the end of the first game. It opens around the ring destroyed in the first game. There's a huge Covenant fleet flying around it, and a massive floating city called High Charity. We see a court, and an elite is on the stand being questioned about the events of the first game. He is standing in front of a new Covenant species. There are 3 of them, and they are leading the proceedings. One of them is not physically here, and he is represented by a hologram. Anyway, this elite seems to be the commander that was in charge of the forces in the first game. He is being blamed for the failure to protect the ring, as the Master Chief, referred to by the Covenant as the Demon, blew it up in the first game. The elite is stripped of his rank, and he is told that he will be left behind when the Covenant embarks on what they call the Great Journey. The scene switches over to the Master Chief, and he is in an armory being grilled by a soldier over damage to his suit. He's been given a new suit called the Mark II, which charges shields faster than the first one did. Johnson shows up and interrupts. How the hell is Johnson still alive? Going by the ending of the first game, it indicates that no one else made it off the ring.
Did anyone else make it? Scanning. Just dust and echoes. We're all that's left.
The game even draws attention to this question and refuses to answer it.
So, Johnson, when you gonna tell me how you made it back home in one piece?
Sorry, Guns. It's classified.
Fuck you, game. I love Johnson in the first game, but explain your fucking bullshit. Anyway, Chief and Johnson are headed to an award ceremony where they are given awards for the parts they played in the first game. There is a woman here too, we have never seen before. The game quickly fills us in on who she is though. Her name is Miranda. She is the daughter of Captain Keyes from the first game, and she joined the Marines just like her father did. And she is here to receive an award on his behalf. We switch back to the Covenant to see how they deal with failure. The Elite has been stripped of his armor and his rank. He is chained up and tortured. And the game switches back to the humans. Cortana says that there is trouble on the way, and you have to make this quick. You are rewarded for your role in the first game. The game switches back again to the Covenant, and a new Covenant species accuses the Elite of heresy for his failure to protect the ring. Miranda is awarded as well. The Elite is branded with the mark on his chest, permanently labeling him as a heretic. And the game switches back to Earth one more time. The Covenant arrive with about 15 ships and attack the platforms floating around Earth. Pick up your weapon and defend the station. Halo 2 begins here. The opening cutscene is both brilliant and a failure at the same time, and I'm going to tell you why. First off, it's brilliant because you get a nice contrast between the Chief and how the UNSC handles success, and the Covenant and how they handle failure. The opening cutscene alone tells you far more about the Covenant than the first game ever did. You learn a bit about the structure of their society, how seriously they take their religion, and that their society is a theocracy, and that they take failure extremely seriously. It's nice to have the Covenant be more fleshed out, where in the first game they were just religious aliens to shoot. Where it fails, however, is in the introduction of the Elite. We all know him as the Arbiter, but do you remember when you saw it for the first time? The game acts as if you know who this guy is, but he wasn't in the first game. There are no Elites with names in the first game at all. This opening is a lot more meaningful the second time around, but the first time, you're going to be going, okay, why should I care about this guy that you haven't even named? Look at how they handle the introduction of Miranda. This game gives you a few lines of dialogue that tells you exactly who she is and why she's here. Generally speaking, you want to show rather than tell, but the game does not expect you to be emotionally attached to Miranda when it first introduces her. It just goes, this is who she is and why she is here. And that's it. It acts like you should know who the Arbiter is and that you should care about him and what's happening to him. You just can't do that. It's both great storytelling and bad storytelling at the same time. One more thing. How the hell did the Covenant learn the location of Earth? In the first game, you were tasked with protecting the AI Cortana because the Covenant could dig through her memory banks and get the location of Earth from her.
Get Cortana off this ship. Keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research. Earth.
They didn't know where it was. When did they find out and how? This is another thing that the game just doesn't tell us. It's never even addressed. Anyway, after fighting through Covenant forces boarding the platform, you hear explosions off in the distance. The Covenant planted bombs on the other platforms, and that means that they planted one here. You need to find it before it explodes. When you do, Cortana is there waiting for you, and you put her back inside your suit. You stop the countdown, and you decide to give the Covenant back their bomb. What happens now is that the Chief flies through space with the bomb. he turns the countdown back on, he shoves it toward a Covenant ship and floats away. The bomb hits the ship and blows it up, and he gets picked up by Johnson. Johnson lets him in, and they head down to the surface where the Covenant are attacking a city called New Mombasa in Africa. I must say that I do have a problem with this scene. It's cool, don't get me wrong, but it is in no way, shape, or form grounded in any sort of reality. This entire sequence is over the top and honestly pretty stupid. The first game lets you know that Chief was a badass, but there was nothing like this in it. He didn't do anything that was absurdly over the top like this. I suppose I can let it slide on cool factor, but it is a bit jarring going from relatively grounded in the first game to this. On the way down to the surface, you intercept a Covenant message repeating regret. Johnson gives this awesome little speech about it. Check it out.
Dear humanity, we regret being alien bastards. We regret coming to Earth. And we most definitely regret the Corps just blew up our raggedy-ass fleet! Hoorah!
God, I love this guy. He's so fucking great. Cortana says that regret is the name of one of the religious leaders, the prophets that were heading the trial in the opening. The prophet of regret has invaded Earth and is calling for help. A giant tank shoots you down out of the sky and you crash land. You wake up sometime later and you head off to battle the Covenant forces on the surface. You eventually find a tunnel that leads to a bridge that heads toward that walking tank. You better take that thing down before it causes too much destruction. The Covenant seems surprised to see humans on Earth, which is weird, but it would explain why they arrived with such a small fleet. Later on in the tunnel, you run into a number of enemy vehicles as the Covenant are trying to regroup. Take them all out, don't let it happen. Upon exiting the tunnel, you come across a group of soldiers who said that they threw everything they had at the enemy tank, calling it a scarab. But to no avail. You are given a tank to take out enemy forces as you make your way across the bridge toward it. Go across the bridge and take out all the enemy vehicles that stand in your way. You eventually come face to face with the thing and it steps right over you. Time to chase it down and board it. You go up to bridges above it as it walks under them. Grab some weapons and jump down onto it. You wind up taking out a few groups of enemies and then it changes to a cutscene of it blowing up. I do not like this either because it does not even show you what to do to blow the thing up. It just cuts from you killing enemies to it blowing up and you stepping off. Anyway, Sergeant Johnson picks you up and he takes you up to Miranda Keys on the ship called In Amber Clad. The Covenant starts to jump into hyperspace, causing a slip space rupture. You get permission to follow him and you jump through the portal just as it closes behind you. The slip space rupture causes a massive explosion that does tons of damage to the city. How many people just died, or are we not supposed to think about that? The game switches back to the Elite. He is being dragged before the other two prophets for sentencing. Their names are Truth and Mercy, and the Covenant that are dragging the Elite are known as Brutes. The leader of the Brutes dragging the Elite is called Tartarus, and Tartarus and his Brutes are dismissed, leaving the prophets alone with the Elite for sentencing. You are in the Mausoleum of the Arbiter. The Arbiter is a special elite warrior that is sent on the most deadly missions that the Covenant partake in. They are sent on suicide missions. They are holy warriors of great importance to the Covenant, the vanguards of the Great Journey. The prophets say that the Elite is not heretic, and they show a recording of another Elite that broke rank with the Covenant and is leading a rebellion. He is the true heretic, and the prophet wants you to become the Arbiter and to put a stop to this rebellion. This Elite was sent here to die, and their High Council might not be happy with him becoming the Arbiter, but the prophets ensure you that you will die on a suicide mission, as all arbiters have before you, and the council will see you dead regardless. The elite accepts and becomes the arbiter. After being stripped of his rank and being branded, he is reborn. He joins a group of Covenant soldiers dispatched to take care of the heretic and his rebellion. He is hiding on a portion of the destroyed ring. A storm is coming and it should give you the element of surprise. After this, you take control of the Arbiter. And this was a controversial decision. It was kind of like in Metal Gear Solid 2, had you play a large chunk of the game as Raiden. The advertisements for the game did not show you playing as the Arbiter, and I imagine that this had to come as quite a shock to people, especially to anyone that was skipping the cutscenes to play the game. Suddenly you find yourself holding an energy sword with a three-fingered hand that is obviously not human. That must have been jarring, but I like it. I like the intertwining stories and all of the extra depth that the Covenant are given. The Arbiter has a temporary invisibility instead of the flashlight that the Chief has. It is useful for sneaking up on enemies. As you are traveling throughout the facility, you notice that the Heretic has employed the Sentinels, the flying enemies from the first game that the Monitor used to deal with the Flood. I wonder how he managed to get them to work for him. It makes sense that they would be here at least. Later on, one of the elites traveling with you notes that he recognizes a stench within the facility, and you come across a group of slaughtered Covenant soldiers. A hologram of the Heretic appears before you, and he is honored that the prophets sent an Arbiter to deal with him. Shortly after that, you are attacked by the Flood. God damn it. I get that they are an important part of the story to this series, but I seriously hate fighting them. Fuck the Flood. And you had to fight them here with Covenant weapons instead of the shotgun and assault rifle. Covenant weapons are significantly less effective against them, so it's even more of a pain in the ass here. You eventually come face to face with the Arbiter, and he runs from you and boxes himself in. You decide to flush him out by cutting the cables that are suspending the facility in the air and forcing it to drop. Why was the facility suspended in the air? What purpose does this serve? What is the point? It's an interesting idea, but the game never even bothers to explain why it was built this way. Anyway, cut the cables and the facility will enter free fall. This forces the Heretic out of his hiding spot, and you chase him in a Banshee. The storm caught up to you by this point. The Arbiter winds up crashing the Banshee, and he climbs up over the edge to safety. You come face to face with the Heretic once again, and he has nowhere left to run. He has 343 Guilty Spark with him, and the Heretic tells you to ask the Monitor about the rings and their purpose. Just before he can answer, the Heretic shoots you. Why does he do this? Dude, you could have had an ally with the Arbiter if he accepts the truth, or you could have the Arbiter questioning the truth from this point forward. Shooting him seems counterproductive. It makes no sense to me. Anyway, do take out the Heretic. At this point, Tartarus shows up, and he pulls 343 Guilty Spark to him with what appears to be some kind of magnetic force. He refers to the Monitor as the Oracle. The Arbiter seems confused that Tartarus would treat the Oracle this way, but they pick you up and fly off. The game cuts back to the humans. In Amberclad exits the slip space rupture right behind the Prophet of Regret and his ship, and it leads you to a second ring. Johnson and Miranda both seem surprised to see another Halo. The existence of a second ring should not be a surprise to either of them, though. It is not a plot twist. The first game flat out tells you that there is more than one ring. Have a listen.
Halo doesn't kill Flood. It kills their food. Humans, Covenant, whatever. We're all equally edible. The only way to stop the Flood is to starve them to death. And that's exactly what Halo is designed to do. Wipe the galaxy clean of all sentient life. You don't believe me? Ask him.
Is it true?
More or less. Technically, this installation's pulse has a maximum effective radius of 25,000 light years. But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life.
I don't care if
Yeah, that means there's more than one ring. Anyway, you and Johnson land on the surface of the ring, prepare for battle because the Covenant have already set up shop. I'm not sure how, because you arrived immediately after they did, but they did. Did they already have soldiers stationed on this ring? I suppose that is possible, but the game makes no mention of it. It's just a minor thing, but it does seem rather odd. There's a lake in the middle of an island with a smaller island on it, and there is a temple structure there. This would be a good place to search for the Prophet of Regret. You do come across a hologram of him where he's giving a sermon about transcendence, and you come across a second hologram as well where he is talking about firing the ring. This is the great journey. Do the prophets even know what this ring does, or do they just not care? The prophet does not currently have the index, so he cannot activate the ring. There is a library on this ring as well, and you can bet that the Covenant know about it too. Miranda decides that her and Johnson are going to find the index and try to reach it before the Flood does. Master Chief continues onward in his quest to take out the Prophet of Regret. The structure above the lake is connected by underwater tunnels, and you will notice that there are fish inside the lake. Given that this is a man-made structure, I am guessing that they had to be placed here on purpose? While in the underwater tunnels, you intercept a message from High Charity. Regret says he arrived at Earth too soon, and he is asking the other prophets for forgiveness. He says that there was no human presence foretold. Why would there be no people on Earth? Why would you even think that? The prophets respond by saying that they will spare him a public display of contempt because of the Council of Mercy, but his actions have put the Covenant at great risk. You eventually arrive at the central island, and a massive Covenant fleet arrives above the ring. High Charity comes with the fleet. The prophet is inside the temple, and he is surrounded by elite honor guard. Go interrupt his sermon by taking out all of them and punching Regret to death. Immediately after his death, the Covenant prepared to open fire on the temple, and I have no clue why. Do they know that the chief is here? Are they trying to kill Regret? Don't they know that they're very likely to kill a bunch of their own warriors? This move makes no sense to me, but it forces the chief to jump into the water. While he sinks down into the lake, he is grabbed by tentacles. Thanks, Japan! The game cuts back to the Arbiter. An elite commanding officer is arguing with the prophets, as the prophets have decided to strip them of the rank of honor guard. The brutes are being given that rank, citing the death of the Regret as the reason for the change. Dude, you just opened fire on the temple that he was in. How do you even know that you didn't kill him? Seriously, is there part of this story that it's missing here? It certainly seems like there is something missing, because there is a lot that does not quite add up. Yes, the chief killed Regret, but none of them saw that. Whatever. The prophets tell the Arbiter that they've been talking to the Oracle, and he has revealed to them that you need the index to fire the ring to start the great journey. It is being stored in the library of this ring, and the two remaining prophets task you with finding the index and bringing it back. You take control of the Arbiter again. Tartarus and the brutes fly you to the library and drop you off. You come across the Flood in the library, and they are the main enemies in this area. You intercept a transmission from the humans, and they seem to be fighting the Flood as well. You leave the first building, and you find yourself in a large snowy field, Out here, you find the shipmaster who accompanied you on the heretic mission. You tell him what you are doing, and he pledges to help. If the Flood weren't annoying enough, they've discovered how to pilot vehicles, and you will run into quite a few driving various enemies and ally vehicles. You find an abandoned tank, so take that and use it to fend off the Flood. It's pretty cool. You get to drive the tank despite playing as a member of the Covenant. You come across a moving platform, and you spot a second moving platform off in the distance. You figure that the humans must be on it, and they are headed to the icon. You better get there first. The brutes will use the ships to cover you as you fend off the Flood on the moving platform. The humans arrive at the index just before you do. Miranda grabs a tentacle or vine of some kind to use to lean out and grab the icon. It starts to slip, and Johnson grabs the other end and pulls her back in. The Arbiter uses the stealth to sneak and attack Johnson and knock him out. Miranda fires at him and chases him off. She drops her guard and starts to look for Johnson. The Arbiter uses that moment to slap her guns out of her hands. Tartarus shows up and takes both Johnson and Miranda prisoner. He takes the index, and the Arbiter protests since it is his responsibility. Tartarus attacks the Arbiter, betraying him and knocking him down into the pit. The Arbiter wakes up in the tentacles of a giant flood monster. He's called the Gravemind, and he is introduced poorly. The game does not really explain to you what he is. He's just some kind of massive flood construct on this ring. Is that what Johnson was turning into in the first game? Anyway, what follows is a conversation that serves as an exposition dump to new players and repeat information to anyone that beat the first game. Master Chief is here. The Gravemind speaks in riddles. Regret has become part of the Gravemind, and the monitor of this installation, 2401 Penitent Tangent, is here too. The monitor says that the ring needs to be activated for containment. Regret says he needs to finish his sermon first. Containment is the same thing as the Great Journey. If you had not figured that out, that is the only new piece of information that this cutscene will give you. The Gravemind wants you to stop the ring from firing, and the Chief confirms that Halo is a weapon. The Arbiter does not want to believe this. The Gravemind teleports Chief and the Arbiter to different likely spots to find the index to put a stop to it being used. I guess you can just do that now? I know Halo has a teleportation grid, but how the hell does he tap into it and teleport others? He just has the power to do that? Can he teleport himself? Anyway, the Master Chief gets teleported onto High Charity, where the prophets are letting the Covenant know that they have the index and can start the Great Journey now. You interrupt this, and they order the soldiers to kill you. Time to fight your way through High Charity to try to stop the prophets from wiping out all life in the galaxy. While you are traveling through High Charity, Cortana picks up the signals of Marines imprisoned on here. You find two groups of Marines imprisoned in the city's prison cells, and you rescue both groups. After doing so, you continue looking for the Prophet. Truth announces to the Covenant that the elites have failed, and that their place in the Covenant as its top warriors were taken over by the brutes. Cortana picks up a lead on where the prophets are. Cortana informs you that fighting has broke out among the Covenant ships and that they have started firing on each other. There is small arms fire throughout High Charity as well. A slip space rupture happens and an Amberclad arrives in the city. Why did it need a slip space rupture? It was near the ring, which means it was very near High Charity. It seems to me that there is no need for a jump to hyperspace. You could probably see High Charity from Amberclad. Just fucking fly there. Anyway, you do see it fly right in front of you, and it crashes somewhere else in the city. Cortana tries to contact the ship, but it gets no response. Fighting broke out among the Covenant as the elites are not happy with their demotion and have started a civil war with the rest of the Covenant. You can sit out a lot of the fights and pick off the remainers' enemies if you'd like to. A brute goes over to the intercom and says to cast down the elites. The elites will still attack you on sight, though. Just because they rebel against the Covenant does not mean they suddenly like humans. Cortana tells you about a shortcut that winds up taking you through the mausoleum of the Arbiter. She picks up the signals of Miranda and Johnson as they are both on high charity. They are headed toward the Prophets as well. Cortana is also getting reports of the flood pouring into the city. Wonderful. They escaped the ring. They are coming out of the wreckage of In Amber Clad. The Gravemind used the ship to escape the ring? I suppose so. Tartarus and the other brutes approach the Prophets with Miranda and Johnson. The flood attack them just as they are trying to escape. The brutes try to fend off the flood, but one of them attaches itself to Mercy's neck. The others escape and they leave Mercy behind. This leaves the Covenant with only one Prophet left. I wonder why they did not try to save him. Is this just a power move by Truth? I do not know. The game switches back to the Arbiter, and he gets teleported to the surface of the ring. The brutes have killed your fellow elites, and they attack you on sight. The Arbiter has no choice but to leave behind the life he knew and his religion. He is forced to fight against the Covenant forces. He vows revenge for the death of his fellow elites. After a while, a wraith rolls up to the Arbiter, and the shipmaster pops out of it. You tell him that the brutes have murdered the elites. The shipmaster thinks that the brutes are acting against the will of the Prophets when a ship flies over and heads to the temple in the distance. It lands, and Tartarus gets out with Miranda. What happened to Johnson? He has the Oracle under one arm. Back to the Chief. He asks the Prophet of Mercy where Truth is headed, and Mercy tells him he's headed to Earth. Chief pulls the flood off his neck. The structure in the middle of the city turns out to be a Forerunner ship. Truth is headed straight for it. The brute still has the index and he needs to be stopped. You leave Cortana behind to blow up In Amberclad, just like you did in the first game, just in case you need to use that to stop the ring from firing. In Amberclad is not on the ring like the Pillar of Autumn was. Are you absolutely sure that this will work? Oh well, chase after Truth. A dropship crashes a short distance away, and floods start pouring out of it. Kill them and make your way toward the Forerunner ship where the Prophet is headed. Truth and the Gravemind start arguing with each other over the city's announcement system. The brutes and the elites are fighting each other over high charity, and the civil war continues. And the Covenant are engaged with the flood all over the ship. It turns out that the Forerunner ship is powering the city. Does that mean that taking off will leave the entire thing without power? It can't, right? There has to be some kind of backup power source or something. When you reach the ship, the Chief flies through some kind of green energy thing straight into it right as the door closes and the ship takes off with the Chief on it. He's about to promise to come back and get Cortana when she interrupts him and says not to make a promise that he knows he can't keep. The game goes back to the Arbiter, and you need to get into the temple to stop Tartarus from firing the ring. The Gravemind says that there is still time. The Arbiter says he must get inside the temple, and the shipmaster lends you a wraith. After fighting so many in the first game, you finally get to pilot one. You make your way down river to an unmanned scarab parked outside a large structure. When you approach it on the second floor, you hear Johnson's voice coming from within. When the hell did he get here and how? The last we saw of him, he was in the hands of the brutes on High Charity. Anyway, he proposes that you two work together to get into the temple. He will pilot the Scarab and you will grab a Banshee and give him support. Fend off enemy forces and make your way back to the temple. Johnson uses the Scarab to blow a hole in the side of it, allowing you to enter. Fly over it and make your way inside. When you reach the control room for the ring, Tartarus is trying to force Miranda to use the index to fire it. You tell him to stop, and you tell him that there are things about the ring that even the prophets do not understand. Tartarus says you're speaking heresy, and the Arbiter asks the Monitor to tell him the truth about Halo. Just as he's about to do it, Tartarus tells him to be quiet. Johnson shows up with a Jackal sniper rifle and tells Tartarus to let the Monitor talk. The Arbiter asks the Monitor once again what the purpose of the ring is. The Monitor tells Tartarus, and Tartarus rejects the truth. He grabs Miranda's hand and forces her to put the index in the console, starting the firing sequence. The Arbiter's defection from the Covenant is now complete. You are left with no choice but to kill Tartarus. After you do, Miranda hops over to the central platform and grabs the index. This stops the ring from firing, and it moves it into standby mode. This means that the rings are ready for remote activation from a place called the Ark. What is the Ark? I don't know. This is where the Arbiter's story ends. The Forerunner ship arrives near Earth, and the UNSC is just about to shoot it down when the Chief informs them that he is on board. When he is asked what he is doing on the ship, he answers, finishing this fight, and it cuts immediately to credits. There's an after-credits scene where the Grave Mind says that he has questions for Cortana, and she is willing to answer, at least to an extent. That's it. That's how the story ends. It's very abrupt, and it feels more like the story stops more than ends. This was a big point of contention for a lot of Halo fans. A lot of people were very angry with this ending, and I can't say I blame them. This feels like a non-ending on a level similar to the first Assassin's Creed or something. Its sequel bait's hard, but it doesn't even do that well, because it just stops abruptly. It's frustrating. As for the narrative itself, well, I pointed out quite a few problems with it. I genuinely think that it has large gaps in logic that were probably explained in content that was cut from the game. I get the feeling that a lot of content was cut from this game because there are quite a few fairly big problems with the writing in it. That's not to say that this is bad by any stretch of the imagination. When you push past that, it's one of the better stories in the series. Where the first game focused on the mystery of the ring and the flood, this game puts a huge emphasis on the Covenant. It really does a lot to flesh them out. You learn a lot about their society, their religion, their motives, their goals, and their history. It makes them a much more interesting faction than you would usually get in first-person shooters. The Covenant are a very fanatical religious group, and I did find myself wondering if they were inspired by Islamic extremism. Given that this game was developed in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks, it would not surprise me. It was on the forefront of everyone's mind at the time. This game has a lot of memorable dialogue as well. It has far more quotable lines than the first game did. Practically everything Sergeant Johnson says is great. The shipmaster and his elites quoting an oath of the Covenant is awesome. Lines like giving the Covenant back their bomb or "this is not your grave" stick out with you long after you finish playing. The credit to the writers here because they put some very good dialogue in this game. It also creates a nice dichotomy between Chief and Arbiter, as it paints both as similar badass warriors for their chosen people, and we get a good look at how different societies deal with victory and failure. It's two elite warriors on similar paths, and you know that they're going to cross at some point. I can't help but wonder if there was some cut content to flesh this connection out more, though. Above all else, though, what makes this work is the Arbiter. He is easily the best part of this game and its story. Bungie tend to develop rather static characters. Their stories tend to focus more on big science fiction concepts, lore, and world building than they do on character development. This typically results in characters that are not as well developed as they could be. The Arbiter is the exception to this. This guy is such a well-developed character, and he has a proper story arc in this game. You really go on an emotional journey with him. He starts off as a very devout Covenant warrior who failed to protect the ring. He is guilt-ridden, and he accepts his fate as a heretic as a direct result. He knows how this works, and his faith is so strong that he just accepts being branded. When he is asked to become the Arbiter, he discards his old life and picks up a new one, figuring that he is already as good as dead, and knowing that the job of the Arbiter is to go on suicide missions, he willingly accepts this. But his new role cannot hide his shame. When the shipmaster says his life means nothing to him, the Arbiter agrees. In dealing with the heretic, he gains back some respect from the shipmaster and gains back his sense of pride. He is finally fully reborn as the Arbiter, only to be betrayed by Tartarus and the prophets when he is told the truth about the ring. Over time, he comes to accept this. He sees that the brutes have killed his fellow elites, and he gains a new purpose: lead the elites in battle against the brutes. He finally comes face to face with his enemy from the first game, and he decides an uneasy alliance with Sergeant Johnson is necessary to stop Tartarus. He comes face to face with the man that he once called brother, and he is completely free of Covenant rule. He has become an independent person, free of the manipulation and lies. It is a wonderful story arc, and an emotionally powerful journey that he goes on. More than anything, he is what makes this story work so well. What really sells the Arbiter, though, is his body language. Watch him closely in the game's cutscenes, and you can see every emotion that he goes through. Given the limited scope of the original Xbox, Bungie did a wonderful job bringing the Arbiter to life in this game. There are a lot of subtleties in the way he carries himself, and there's a strong sense of emotion in the rather limited, by modern standards, facial animation and body language. You get a lot more out of his character as a direct result. Graphically, you have probably noticed that this is a significant upgrade from the first game. The team was able to push the original Xbox a lot further graphically with this game. It is not at the same level as the E3 demo, but every single corner of this game is packed with a lot more detail than was in the first game. It was rather impressive for its time. The attention to detail extends to the animation. The first game had stiff and rigid animation for the most part, but everything has been smoothed out for this game. It does have some of the better animations on the original Xbox. Everything is so much more fluid and lifelike, at least compared to the first game. And that allowed Bungie to put a much bigger focus on things like facial expressions and body language. Just like the first Halo, this game does hold up a lot better than a lot of games from this generation do because of the art style. I talked about this when I reviewed the first game, but Halo has a very distinct art style. And the higher detailed nature of the graphics in this game really do help the art style shine through even more than it did in the first game. Because of the art direction, I doubt Halo 2 will ever be flat out ugly. That's the power of great art direction, and Bungie has some of the best. The effects are impressive across the board as well. Lighting effects are improved. Fog effects are improved. Muscle flashes look better. Shadows are better. Particle effects are better. Underwater effects are better. Everything combines to create a much more natural looking environment than anything that was possible in the first game. I do have a couple of gripes about how this game looks though, and this is probably going to sound weird. I am not even sure how to explain this, but a lot of the Covenant environments and weapons tend to kind of look fake and plasticky look to them, I guess. The purples and blacks, especially on the weapons and on the floors of High Charity, have this strange matted fabric look to them. This is the only game in the series where it looks like this to me. In every other game, it does not look like this. Am I alone in this? It's a minor thing, but it's always bothered me. The other thing that bothers me is the inconsistency in the weapons in this game from the first game. Why did they change the way the human weapons look between games? The pistol in this game looks different and is a different color than the pistol in the first game. I understand nerfing it because it was overpowered in the first game, but why the different look? It's just an example, but I find it to be an odd design choice because it lacks consistency. The sound design for Halo 2 has been improved from the first game for the most part. There are exceptions, and if you watched my first Halo review, you probably know what I am going to say here. But first, the good. This adds more environmental noise than the first game had, and it's all fairly impressive for a game from this era. Definitely play this game with a good subwoofer because it will reward you handsomely for it. It really puts it to good use. Much like the first game, every single weapon in this game has its own distinct sound. Every weapon sounds different from every other weapon. Even energy weapons manage to have their own distinct sounds. I do applaud Bungie for trying to make sure each weapon does have its own sound. It does stand out in this regard. However, I must say once again that the weapons largely sound fairly weak. The sniper rifle sounds alright. The battle rifle is the best sounding weapon in the game. By and large, though, the sounds for the weapons is carried over from the first game. It was not that impressive in that game, and it's not that impressive here. The sound is kind of weak, and it has always bothered me about Halo. See, I like good sound. I'm the kind of guy that will mount speakers on my wall. I don't go cheap when it comes to picking out speakers and head units to use for my games, music, and movies. I love good sound. The weaker weapons have always bothered me for this reason. The weapons just are not as fun to fire in this game as they should be because of it. And I never enjoyed Halo nearly as much as others, partially for this reason. When it comes to the voice work, it's great across the board. You can tell that Bungie had a much larger budget for this one because they pulled out a bunch of big names for this voice cast. It features talented people like Kevin Michael Richardson, Keith David, and Ron Perlman. Everyone turned in a great performance. Of course, Jen Taylor and Steve Downes and Dave Scully all returned to reprise their roles as Cortana, Master Chief, and Sergeant Johnson. This game has a lot more dialogue and a lot more cutscenes than the first game does because it fleshes out the world and story a lot more than the first game did. Getting good voice work was absolutely key to making this work, so it was definitely worth it to get some bigger name voice actors to legitimize this series as one of the industry's heavy hitters and to lend such an exceptional voice work to the game. The script is worth it. What can I say about Halo 2's music that hasn't already been said? Much like the first game, Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore return to score this game, and they haven't lost a single beat. The score for the first game was one of the most praised aspects, and I praised it to the high heavens in my review last year. It's deserving of it. It's excellent work. They set a very high standard for themselves to live up to in this game. What if I told you that the soundtrack for Halo 2 surpasses the first game? What if I went a step beyond that and told you that this might be the single best soundtrack in the entire series? Well, it is, and it might be. The soundtrack to this game is just as good as it is made out to be. Given the Arbiter's journey and the arc through this game, this soundtrack calls for a much bigger range of emotion than the first game ever did. Where the first game sought mostly to create an unsettling atmosphere, drive an air of mystery, or heighten the excitement of combat, Halo 2's soundtrack stepped up its game to be much more emotionally impactful. It'll make you sad, it'll make you angry, and yes, it will drive an unsettling atmosphere and hype up combat. It really makes you feel every plot twist, betrayal, and moment of sorrow that this game has to offer. Beyond that, it incorporates a wider range of styles than the first game did. It adds a lot more electric guitar for soloing and killer riffs. It has some thicker bass lines and pounding drums than the first game did. O'Donnell and Salvatore put all of it to very good use throughout this game. It uses a few licensed tracks to top it off, with tracks from well-known bands such as Breaking Benjamin and Incubus. They aren't my usual thing, but they are put to good use here. So, it's a technical improvement pretty much across the board, but how does it play? As you can imagine, it's pretty similar to the first game, but there are a number of changes and improvements. The first big change you will notice is that health packs are gone. I do not consider this a good thing. I have never been a fan of regenerating health, and that is effectively what this game has with its regenerating shield system. Your shield drains and you have to hide until it refills. To compensate for the complete lack of health packs, your shield charges much faster than it did in the first game. This is a double-edged sword though, because it also drains much faster than it did in the first game. It can be frustrating with how quickly you seem to die at times. Every enemy weapon kills you faster than it did in the first game on every single difficulty. It leads to cheap deaths regardless of what difficulty you are on. On the lower difficulties though, it is fair for the most part. I would still rather have health packs and recharging shields though. I enjoy that more. You can dual wield weapons now. This does not apply to every single weapon. You cannot carry something like 2 sniper rifles or 2 rocket launchers, but you can carry 2 of a lot of smaller weapons. Pistols, submachine guns, plasma pistols, plasma rifles. It has the downside of not being able to change weapons without dropping one, but dual wielding weapons is so much fun that you probably will spend most of the game doing it. I know I did. This game gives you new weapons to play with as well. The most significant of this is the battle rifle. It fires 3 round bursts and it lets you zoom in to use it to snipe enemies. It's a very fun weapon to use, and it sounds better than any other weapon in the game. The Covenant have an equivalent rifle with a zoom called a carbine. It's not quite as fun as the battle rifle, but it's nice to have more Covenant weapons that have reload functions. You can use the energy sword in this game, and it's just as awesome as it looked in the first game. You can one-shot a lot of smaller enemies with it. Be careful with the brutes and elites though. They do not necessarily go down in one shot. You can also use hunter weapons this time around, the fuel cannon rod. It functions basically like the rocket launcher does, except it fires explosive green balls of energy. Kind of like the BFG. It's fun for taking out vehicles or groups of enemies. The Covenant now have a particle beam rifle. This is basically their version of the sniper rifle. If you enjoyed using the sniper rifle, you will enjoy using this too. The brute shot, on the other hand, fires small explosive rounds at the enemy. It's less powerful than the fuel cannon rod or the rocket launcher, but it is fun to use on individual enemies, provided you have distance between you and them, of course. Remember when I said that the needler was basically worthless in the first game? Well, scratch that shit. It's much better in this game. The projectiles fire significantly faster than they did in the first game, and they are much more accurate. You are much more likely to stick your target with them than you were in the first game, and dual wielding them is incredibly deadly to basically any enemy. They are a lot of fun to use now. As far as vehicles go, the Warthog can now blow up. Be careful about that, they are no longer invincible. You can drive the Wraith. It is the Covenant version of the tank, but it does not function exactly the same. It fires explosive balls of energy in an arc that can make it tricky to aim and use. It's fun to master though. The Covenant now have a vehicle called the Spectre. Think of it as their version of a Warthog. There is a vehicle called the Shadow as well. It is a transport vehicle and can hold up to 8 people at once. It has a gunner seat, but you rarely run into them in the game. They are mostly just in the tunnel on New Mombasa. The vehicles seem to control better across the board. You will be flipping the Warthog less than you did in the first game, that is for certain. They all control similar but refined, except for the Banshee. It is much better here than it was in the first game. It can move from side to side where the previous one couldn't. It's hard to go back to the first game after having played Halo 2 because of how much better it handles in this game than it did in the first. The Covenant enemies return from the first game, but they come with 2 new types. The first of these are the Brutes. They are the most significant addition. They kind of look like Wookiees, and they can take a lot of punishment before they go down. They are formidable foes even if their AI is not as good as the elites. They are still fun to fight. If you anger them though, they will drop their weapons and charge straight at you. This can be a little annoying in tight quarters. The other is the drone. These are flying insect-like creatures, and they are pretty quick and hard to hit when they are in the air. You would think that this would make them a pain in the ass to deal with, but they're really not. They tend to die about as easily as the grunts do. They are just a lot more mobile and less easily frightened. I cannot help but wonder where these guys came into the picture from a story perspective. Neither was in the first game, so when did they join the Covenant? This game happens about a month after the first game did, right? When then did they become a part of the Covenant? During that month? Is that why they weren't in the first game? Introducing changes like this is a little jarring given how little time passes between games. From a gameplay perspective, I get why they are here. From a storytelling perspective, I don't see how they make any sense. There is one other new enemy as well, the Jackal Sniper. I heard a few of you groan at me even for mentioning it, didn't I? Don't worry, I will get to it. But these guys are basically jackals that do not have a shield, but shoot at you from a long distance. They are jackals still, so they are easy to kill. Still, they can pelt you with fire before you even figure out where they are. Then there is the Flood. Fuck the Flood. All they do is charge at you. They are brainless. I get that they are supposed to be an overwhelming horde. I get that they serve a narrative purpose. But none of that makes them fun to fight. They are not fun to fight. They are boring and frustrating. Fuck them. They ruin every single level that they are in. There is less of them in this game than there was in the first game, where they single-handedly ruined the second half of it. But they are no more fun to deal with here than they were in the first game. Again, I say, fuck the Flood. Halo level design is at its best when it gives you larger and more open areas to run around and take enemies out in. There are certainly areas like that spread throughout this game, and the game is a lot more fun when you are fighting in them. That is when Halo 2 is at its absolute best. Unfortunately, the level design is not as consistent as I would like it to be. At times, it kinda sucks. The big problem with this game's level design is that it repeatedly parades you down long tunnels and hallways without much room to maneuver. I don't mind a corridor shooter, but this is Halo. The enemy AI, the weapons, the vehicles were not designed for this kind of gameplay in mind. When the game parades you down fairly narrow corridors, such as the tunnels in New Mombasa or the hallways of High Charity, the gameplay really suffers for it. If you want to know how frustrating and flat out bad the level design can be, play this game on Legendary. But don't say I didn't warn you. I wouldn't recommend Legendary to anyone. The placement of jackal snipers will become incredibly inconvenient on this, and they will basically one-shot you before you see where they are. Nothing says fun and fair gameplay quite like opening a door and getting one-shotted by an enemy on the other side before you can even get a glimpse at what is on the other side of that door. The Actman did a video on why the Legendary difficulty is straight up unfair bullshit in this game, and I'd recommend giving that a watch. Just don't play this game on Legendary. The spots of bad level design become blindingly obvious there. Having said that, the level design never gets ultra repetitive like it did in the first game, where it copied and pasted sections over and over again to the point of insanity. For the most part, it does keep copying and pasting to a minimum, and the game is better for it. It never really feels repetitive. It does lock you down in place and make you defend against waves of enemies at multiple points throughout the campaign, so pick your poison. I guess, personally, I would much rather have this than the blatantly repetitive design of the first game. As for replay value, well, the servers for the original game were shut down long ago. You can't hop into multiplayer, but there is enough fun to be had in the campaign that it is well worth revisiting, even if you have to suffer through the Flood again. You can always play through it locally with a friend as well. Games like this are always more fun with a buddy by your side. It does not have as much replay value as it did at launch, but there is fun to be had on more than one trip through the campaign. I would certainly revisit this game again before I did the first game. Halo 2 is most definitely not a perfect game. It has problems ranging from a bad ending to corridors that Halo combat was never built for, to gaps in its storytelling, but I can't deny that I like this game quite a bit more than I do the first game. It looks better, it sounds better, it controls better, it adds new pieces to the Halo sandbox, and the Arbiter is the best character in the entire series. If you have never played it, give it a shot. It's a pretty damn good shooter, all things considered. Much like the first game, Halo 2 is playable in more than one way. It is backwards compatible on the Xbox 360, of course, but I would recommend playing it on original hardware over that version. Xbox 360 backwards compatibility is known for being a little wonky, and that is certainly the case here. It has frame rate issues and ghosting that are not present on the original console. Hang on to your original Xbox to revisit Xbox games that you cannot play on the One. There is a PC port of Halo 2 as well. It has higher frame rates, a bit more detail packed into its environments, and it supports much higher resolutions. It has two major problems though. It was designed to be a Windows Vista exclusive, and it utilizes the much loved Games for Windows Live. What? You mean you don't love that? It causes problems? It might not run on modern hardware or modern operating systems? Well, I have good news for you. The modding community has you covered. There is a mod for the PC version of Halo 2 that strips it of Games for Windows Live and Windows Vista exclusivity. It gets it running on modern hardware, and it runs it at modern resolutions such as 1080p. This is the absolute best way to play the original version of Halo 2 as of this video. Thank you, modding community, for getting this game back up and running. This mod kicks ass. That is not the best way to play Halo 2 in general though. When 343 Industries remastered the Halo games for the Xbox One via the Master Chief Collection, they gave Halo 2 a proper facelift. Much like the first game, Halo 2 got a massive boost in graphics. They layered a new engine over the top of the original and created all new visuals. It comes with updated sound design and music as well. Oh, and it runs at 60 FPS. It feels smooth as silk on top of being the best looking game in the franchise to date. Halo 2 Anniversary is, without a doubt, the best way to play Halo 2. You don't know how much that 60 FPS means until you feel just how much smoother it is to play over the original. If you prefer the original graphics, you can switch between them with the click of a button. It adds terminals for extra lore, depth, and backstory for the Arbiter. Thank you for watching. I know it's been a long time coming for this review. It has been more than a year since I reviewed Halo 1. If you have been waiting, thank you for your patience. I hope I did justice. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the bell to get notifications from my channel, and leave a comment below. What's your favorite version of this game? How awesome is the Arbiter? Do you agree that he is the best character in the series? Talk to you later, everyone. Doom Dog out.